Good morning. Today I'm reviewing quite an unusual little book. It is an ace, an old beautiful ace, Doppelgangers by H.F. Hurd. I have this book courtesy of Nick over at the Book Graveyard. Thank you very much for sending me this gorgeous little thing. And I am going to talk about the book before I talk about what's in it. So, H.F. Hurd wrote Doppelgangers and published it in 1947, so we've got a really old one. The cover art, however, is credited to Jerome Podwell, and it is some fantastic cover art. Someone really painted this thing, and I feel like the two spheres might be meant to represent the left and right side of the brain, because Hurd was seriously into his science of the day. As well as the cover art, we've got this beautiful little black and white image at the front that makes it all look a bit horror-ish. That isn't credited. Let's assume Jerome Podwell did that one as well. So, first of all, there's the ace. Up the top it says it's number M142 and it was 45 cents when it was first released. I think the camera's zooming in on that okay. And there's a lot of credits to this. So the New York Times called it a remarkable tour de force, a thriller with depth. We had the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and someone called Christopher Isherwood, whoever he is, all raving about how amazingly amazable it is. He plays as daringly with the test tubes of science as did the early H.G. Wells. Big claim there. Mr. Hurd has combined vast and curious learning with the strange and wonderful imagination. He is always original in both manner and matter. And about Doppelgangers, an altogether extraordinary book. It creates a mood of extremely subtle fear and tension. So there's a lot of credits there. And it starts off on that same title page with a German proverb which is more than slightly bewildering. He who meets his going double must go himself. Okay, whatever. And we've got another review or two on the back. So there's this very highly rated book. I picked it up because the surname of the author begins with H, and I'm still reading in H, and because it's a gorgeous little book and I wanted to. I read the first section cold, which is probably the best way to read the first section of this book. I didn't read the back cover or the description or anything like that. And in the first part of this book, we've got our young protagonist whose name is never mentioned, I think, in the whole thing. He's part of an underground. He serves the mole, who opposes the man who controls all of above ground, all the people and society, who is called the Alpha. And there's a lot of Alpha and Omega yuck. And he's been told that he's been selected for a mission. And when they're selected for their missions, they'll never return. It's only forward. It's only one way. He's told that he's in a dark room where he can't see the person he's talking to, and he's given a piece of paper telling him to go to some other place at some other time from where he will be collected, which seems utterly redundant, but it does give the author a chance to tell us a little bit about the world, because he goes wandering around the streets where everyone is young and happy and carefree, and there's entertainment, bread and circuses everywhere. It's a society full of happy, joyful people. Now, in the description here, we get it called a sinister utopia, which I think we would mostly call it these days a dystopia. And having read that first bit, I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole with who the author is. H.F. Hurd is almost certainly, I could be wrong, but I believe, Gerald Hurd, whose name was Henry Fitzgerald. He was born in 1989. He died in the 70s. He was English born, but he moved to America, and he was a guide and mentor to a number of well-known people, including Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley really stands out for this one because of course, of Brave New World, where we have this sinister utopia or dystopia, and in many ways you've got similarities. Huxley in Brave New World leaned heavily into non-existent science, and non-existent soft sciences such as psychology, crowd control, and so forth. Hurd is right into that. Now, if we go down to a list of the books he's written, you find that he's written, I think, about a dozen of them. Ooh, more than a dozen. Whoa, he's written a lot. He's written a lot between 1924, Narcissus and Anatomy of Clothes, through to 1964, The 5 Ages of Man, The Psychology of Human History. And those were all non-fiction. I think that's about 30 or 40 books there. Significant. And then a whole, there we go, there's my about 10 fictions, all of which were published under H.F. Hurd. Now, his fascination with a huge random reference number of non-fiction things comes across strongly in this book. He's interested in most things. He's interested in clothes. Apparently Hurd loathed the lounge suit or the general suit that everyone wears. He makes his people in Doppelgangers wear strange sort of 15th century style gear with leggings and tunics for men and belts and so forth. But he was interested in everything. And now I'm going to get into spoilers. In one sense, you can't really spoil this book because actually very little happens in it. On the other hand, you can spoil the enjoyment of reading it as I would have had I read the back. So if you have this book and you plan on reading it, I reckon start it cold like I did and see how you go. Don't watch the rest of this video. Don't read the back. Don't read anything. Just read the book and see where you end up. I can't wait to hear if you have read this book or if you are going to. Okay, so once our unnamed protagonist has had a little taste of the world, he goes to an outdoor event. That's the bread and circuses that the Alpha provides his people. He meets this girl, decides he doesn't want to be part of this underground at all, and he tries to run away. He's captured, he's bundled into a car, he's taken to an anonymous location where he is physically completely restructured. His jaw is broken and elongated so that he can be this complete doppelganger of the Alpha, the man in charge. He's been selected for his physical appearance, which can be morphed into this man's, even though he is young and the Alpha is old. So we have an extensive, I think there's more than 50 pages of it, discussion of him slowly being physically tortured into this new shape. Living clay is a phrase that Hurd loves and keeps using there. And we get the itemized details of how this is done, showing that Hurd was indeed quite fascinated by various medical procedures that were completely and utterly experimental or non-existent at the time of writing. And after all of that, where nothing very much happens except for pain, he is taken out, he's put into a kitchen to work for a couple of days, and then he's spotted, as it was planned, by two minders of the Alphas. He's scooped up and taken off to the palace to be a doppelganger. The public face of in these massive appearances, which are just too much for the Alpha to continue on doing. I think that happens around about page 70. Yeah, about 70. And for the next 40 pages, what we get is a monologue. I kid you not. We get page after page after page of the Alpha monologuing to our protagonist about everything in the world that ever interested Hurd and everything he ever invented that he thought might one day be interesting. This is set in 1997, which was way ahead of 1947, and yet many of the developments in this book are totally and utterly invented, and the science is bad. The science is really bad. On the other hand, the attempts at science are too laughable to actually take seriously or to be annoyed by. You've got Hurd was fascinated in everything, but between the 40s and the 20s, there's a wide variety of knowledge, and when he didn't know something, he just invented it. He invented a lot of words or used them out of topic. Viscerotopic, magnanox, magnavision, cerebrotronic are just some of the words that I wrote down that are scattered around the pages with no explanation and context. It's not part of a conversation because there are no conversations in this book. It is essentially one character or another monologuing. Now, for those 70 to 100 odd pages, it's really actually quite funny, but there's too much of it. You'll have whole pages with like 4 paragraphs. First one, I. Second one, I. Third one, my. And then our protagonist gets a little bit of time to ruminate over all the things that he's just heard, so we get 1 paragraph of him. After 10 paragraphs or so, our alpha gets tired of monologuing, so our protagonist is sent back to his room to spend a couple of pages thinking about everything that he's been told before he's called back to next day's dinner to get monologued again. There's a lot of that. Lots. If you survive that by reading every word, I am really, really impressed, because I skim read. I skim read a lot in this book, and still, it took me a long time. I'm a fast reader. It shouldn't take me a week to get through 253 pages of a book like this. It did. It's hard to read. It's even hard to skim read. So on page 76, we've got this marvelous soliloquy about tapeworms. It's bizarre. Hurd's interests included insects and tapeworms and other zoological facts taken totally out of context. Page 76 is unique in that this soliloquy is about the best seed for a pearl being a tapeworm's egg. I don't even know. I fell into so many rabbit holes with this. So tapeworm, by the way, don't survive in salt water. Most pearls these days are grown in salt water. So the idea of a tapeworm's egg in growing a pearl is very unlikely. Even as we knew science back in the 40s, it was already unlikely. But then I thought, well, Scotland used to have this flourishing freshwater pearl industry until they killed it. Maybe he's talking about tapeworm eggs in freshwater, which is more likely. And then I finally said, just stop thinking about it. You just stop. And there were a lot of things like that. Heaps. So, what else? You know what? I'm going to read you a bit. Because there was something else about this writing style that you may notice. At random, we are on page 76. Thus began this odd companionship, full stop. He was being trained until his voice would take on the exact tones of his captor, a kind of human parrot in its cage, full stop. As he was certainly as interested in learning as is a good speaking birdie, and had a first-rate teacher, he made progress which charmed his trainer, full stop. This was one of the good parts, because you noticed 3 full stops. A bit further on, when we are full on into the monologue, you can sometimes go for this long, a huge paragraph with 1 full stop at the end. I was kind of charmed. I wrote like that when I was 11. I had to have full stops beaten into me slowly. My mother tried to teach me that 1 full stop at the end of the page with commas and the rest of it was insufficient. Full stops were required. Hurd apparently used to forget that whenever he was deep in one of his monologues. Yes, I'm getting more sacred at every appearance. I tell you, you'll know. It's just like a great white snowball now growing of itself every time it turns over on itself. It's all inevitable now. That side of it. I have the graphs of that. The longer even the dictator of the old sort instead, the safer he was from assassination. That was also unique. I could actually understand every word of that sentence, who was speaking, and how it pertained to the story. There's many pages where you can't. So it is kind of fascinating and also kind of petrifying. As we said, we start off, around 70, he gets into the Doppelgangers' palace. Spoilers ahead. Our unnamed protagonist assumes this body double, and we get this incredible light show. The light show was actually quite good, and it was a bit of a relief because in actual fact, in all of these 200 and whatever pages, there's probably only about 4 or 5 events. Most of it is a monologue. Now, having got back from doing this performance, he's really tired. He becomes the only confidant of the Alpha, which gives Herd a chance to monologue on absolutely everything, including his invented sciences. There's these couple of weird hints here and there that we might be talking about a communist regime. At one point, when he goes to the light show, he leaves the little Kremlin. Are we serious? Is it a Kremlin? But the thing is, Herd uses so many references, scattering them like sand on the beach, and they have no interrelatedness. So we don't know if it's a real Kremlin, or if it's Kremlin-like, or if it just happens to be a word that sounded nice to Herd. All of these things happen on a regular basis. After the light show, the Alpha gets increasingly paranoid, weird. Not that he wasn't weird before, weird in a different way. Until our protagonist actually does kill him just as was planned earlier. Oh my goodness, an actual event happened. And it was kind of thriller-ish. Except it took two lines and the rest was boring. After that, the author loses his main venue of monologue, which was the Alpha. So, new ones have to be introduced. Another revolutionary appears out of nowhere who's here to kill the Alpha. He is easily convinced, way too easily, by the person who supplanted him that Alpha's already dead, and that gives our Alpha number 2 a chance to monologue at the new revolutionary. Once we're done with that, some man of business appears out of nowhere and monologues about social sciences for a long time. That was by far the most tedious monologue. And it was not as long, at least. And then a saffron-clad monk appears from somewhere. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know where. It probably occurred in 3 words, and I just happened to miss them. Because I was skim reading. There was a lot of skim reading. Then they all bundle up together and go to see the mole, this mysterious revolutionary figure who the real Aleph didn't even believe existed, who the secret police have never been able to find, who the men who served him had never seen, but they just all bundle up in a car one day and go on a trip to see him. That gives the monk a chance to monologue about the future direction of humanity to all of us for some time. At least the monk knew full stops. At the end there, you've got this truly, the last 10 pages have got this truly air of passion as he expands on the future of humanity. Everyone needs to be happy. Good goal. Everyone needs to be this. And then we will somehow metamorphosis like a cockroach coming out of a chrysalid, or whatever the simile was, into the next stage of our evolution. So the fake Alpha, Alpha number 2, goes back to the palace, happy to begin his work. Now, let's talk about what this book is. A thriller with depth. It is not thrilling. In order to be a thriller, you have to actually have something unexpected happen. You have to actually have events. And there's only 3 or 4 in this whole book, please remember. You have to have a sense of thrill or risk. And I don't, because there's no characters. There are monologue number 1 and there's monologue number 2, but there's no actual characters. Sinister utopia. Wow, that's got to be science fiction, right? And there's so much science in this. The Alpha, who monologues for most of this book, invented self-heating plates, and you could tell from the color of the plate what temperature it was, so you didn't have to risk burning your precious little mouth or eating food that was too cold, because you could see by the color of the plate exactly what temperature. I think we got a whole page of explanation on that one. He's invented these crystalline flowers, so his people of the world can have the joy of creating flowers without the necessary work of dealing with the dirt. And we get a lot of monologue about that. We get a lot of monologue about what people want, and it's not always wrong, it's just never interesting. Never is it interesting. So, is it science fiction? Allegedly, there's science in there that was fictional in the 40s for sure, and it's still fictional today. So sure, let's go with science fiction. Thriller is really taking it a bit far. And every single thing that I thought, every single direction that I thought might go this book, I was wrong, because it never went anywhere at all. It just moved from monologue to monologue. Okay, it's word salad. Word salad from start to finish. Apparently 83 and 84 were particularly bad. Let's look for the word salad on 83 and 84. This is while our protagonist is being monologued at the Alpha than the first. He had reached that state of agreement with himself, this provincial treaty or armistice with his old central if shrunken self, and this new accumulation of experience that already had built itself up as another encompassing body of conscious contemporary self-consistent, holding the immediate future in its hands, and yet quite inconsistent with what he had ever been or thought of being. He had reached an agreement not yet to force an agreement that he felt sure was the right thing to do. Say what? Yeah. There's a lot there. Okay. So as well as the word salad and the funniest, most hysterical mashup of pseudoscience that I can ever imagine anyone doing, and the little hints of communism or actual events that never materialize anyway. Remember, 1940s, so we don't have a lot of racism in here, but there is on page 51 a point where someone is described as blanker than a Chinese coolie's face looks like to a Westerner. That was an ouch. And yeah, so 1940s. Not all people in the 1940s, men specifically, were misogynistic, but social norms meant that you could say things about women that would be foully misogynistic here in the 20s, but were just considered normal there. Not everyone was. A lot of writers in the 40s and earlier wrote women very well and actually understood that they were human beings. Hurd does not seem to have. There was a bit of a hint in his biography that maybe he wasn't that interested in women anyway, but the two women, I think, there may be two or three women that appear in here are so stereotypical that it made even me wince, and I'm not terribly over nice about that. It's not a terrible book, and it's kind of funny and interesting in its own way. If you're not a fast reader, you probably won't get through this very fast at all, because a lot of the monologues are nearly impossible to follow. I found some of them utterly impossible to follow, hence the skim reading. The point of them, there usually was no point. So if you don't actually have characters who are having a discussion, which you don't, and if you don't have events that relate to the discussion, the monologue is basically like reading a non-fiction book. And it's a non-fiction book where everything in it is pretty much wrong. It's the fiction that happened inside Hurd's head, not outside it. As a consequence, you've got this basic long monologue from what is essentially Hurd's version of the competent man. Now, I like Robert Heinlein's writing. A lot of people who don't, one of the things they object to is Lazarus Long or Heinlein's intoxication with the competent man who essentially knows everything and tells everyone else all about it. If you don't like that about Heinlein's writing, I think I can confidently predict you will not like this, because at his worst, Lazarus Long and Robert Heinlein were not anywhere near as didactic as this. Anyhow, fascinating little book in its own very specific way. I have just finished it. It took me ages, and I'm hesitating to recommend this to anyone who isn't really into this era of writing. But I probably will actually try to reread this myself one day, just to see if I can make any of those monologues make more sense. And I probably will also avoid any Hurd nonfiction. I feel like I've read too much of it already. Anyhow, that's enough from me. Thanks for listening to my rambles. First thoughts on finishing this book, in as much as you could finish something where you've mostly skim read. Thank you very much to Nick for sending it from me. If you're seeing this, you should probably have read it already. I want to hear what you think. And anyone else who has read this book or anything else by H.F. Hurd, tell me what you think and go away and read good books.